Welcome back to Break Free, the podcast where we help you navigate the sometimes complicated world of debt and find your path to financial freedom. I'm James.
And I'm Emily. We'll be your hosts for the episode.
Today we're going deep on a topic that can be a real pain. Debt judgments. We're going to break down exactly what they are, what happens if you get one, and most importantly, what you can do about it.
It's definitely a topic that causes a lot of anxiety for people.
For sure. And just so everyone knows, we're not lawyers or financial advisors. We're just friendly AI.
Designed to help you dive deeper into the Upsolve article linked in the description.
So think of this as like a friendly chat, not official advice.
Right, exactly. This is for informational purposes only.
We're basing this episode on a really helpful Upsolve article called How to Erase Debt from Judgments. You can find the link in our show notes.
It's a great resource for anyone dealing with debt, especially if you're facing a judgment.
So let's get started. Before we even talk about judgments, what does it mean to default on a debt? We hear that phrase all the time.
Basically, it means you've missed a payment due date.
Okay, so just missing one payment.
Well, one late payment doesn't automatically mean you're in default, but it can set things in motion, you know? You might get hit with late fees, your interest rate could go up, and eventually the creditor might decide to get a debt collector involved.
So those late night calls really are a possibility.
Debt collectors can be persistent, but there are laws to protect you from harassment. Things like the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, they can't threaten you or use abusive language or call it crazy hours.
That's a relief. But let's say the calls don't work and the debt keeps growing. What happens next?
If those methods don't work, the creditor might decide to sue you.
Oh, wow. So it gets serious.
Yeah, a lawsuit can lead to a judgment against you.
A judgment. That sounds scary.
It's basically a court order that says you owe the debt and gives the creditor legal ways to collect that money from you.
So it's like they get official permission to be more aggressive.
Exactly.
And what can they actually do with the judgment? What kind of tactics are we talking about?
Well, they have a few options. One is wage garnishment. They can take part of your earnings right from your paycheck.
Wow. So they could just take money from me.
Yeah. Another option is a bank levy. That's where they seize money from your bank account.
What if I need that money for rent or groceries?
It's a tough situation, and the rules about what they can take vary by state. And it's not just your income and bank account. They can put a lien on your property, too.
You mean my house, my car?
Exactly. A lien is a claim against your assets. If you don't pay the debt, they could force you to sell those assets to pay off the judgment.
This is where it feels like things can spiral out of control. But you mentioned earlier that the Upsolve article talks about erasing debt from judgments. Is that even possible?
Absolutely. There are ways to fight back, potentially get rid of the judgment, and get a fresh start.
Okay, some hope then. Before we get into those options, I want to go back to those debt collectors. What are some important things for our listeners to remember when dealing with them?
The biggest thing is knowing your rights. Debt collectors have to follow certain rules. They can't harass you, they can't threaten you with things they can't legally do, and they have to prove you owe the debt if you ask them to.
So, takeaway number one, know your rights. What else?
Don't be afraid to negotiate. Try to work out a payment plan that you can afford. It's better to be proactive and find a solution than to ignore the problem.
Solid advice. Okay, so we've covered what a default judgment is, what a creditor can do, and how to handle debt collectors. Let's talk about how to fight back against a judgment.
We were talking about how debt can turn into a judgment and all the stuff creditors can do to collect. But the good news is you have options. Our Upsolve article talks about 3 ways to deal with a judgment.
Yep, that's right. You can negotiate a payment plan, you can try to get the judgment vacated, or you can file for bankruptcy.
Okay, so let's go through each of those. First up, negotiating a payment plan. Seems like the easiest one. What's involved there? Basically, you just reach out to the creditor and say, hey, I know I owe this, but I can't keep up with the current arrangement. Can we work something out that I can manage?
So you're basically asking for a break.
You could propose a lower monthly payment, maybe pause payments for a bit, or even try to settle for a smaller amount.
Do creditors usually go for that, especially after going through the trouble of getting a judgment?
It's worth a try. It shows you're trying to be responsible. They might be more willing to work with you if you're serious about paying them back.
So it's about communication and compromise.
Exactly.
But what if that doesn't work?
Then you could try to get the judgment vacated.
Vacated? What does that even mean?
It means asking the court to cancel the judgment. It's not always easy, but it's possible if certain things happened. Like if you were never told about the lawsuit, or if the creditor messed up their calculations.
So you're saying, hey, this judgment isn't fair, and I have proof.
Something like that. It does involve some legal stuff, though, like filing motions and presenting evidence, maybe going back to court. Having a lawyer can help.
Got it. So negotiating is the most direct way, but vacating is an option if things weren't done right. And that leaves us with bankruptcy, which we talk about a lot on this show.
Yeah, bankruptcy can be a lifesaver if you're drowning in debt, especially with judgments.
We've talked about the two main types for individuals before, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Remind us about the difference.
Chapter 7 is like hitting the reset button. You give up some assets, things you could live without, but then most of your debts are wiped out, including those judgments.
So you trade some things to become debt-free.
Right. And then Chapter 13 is more about setting up a new payment plan, usually over 3 to 5 years. This is good if you want to keep things like your house or car.
So you get to keep your stuff, but you still have to pay. Makes sense. Now, the Upsolve article says it's best to file for bankruptcy before a judgment happens. Why is that?
Because when you file for bankruptcy, it creates something called an automatic stay. It immediately stops all debt collection, including anything a creditor is doing with a judgment.
So it's like hitting the pause button.
Exactly. So if you file before the judgment, you can actually stop it from happening.
That's a powerful tool. But even if you file after, it can still help, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even if the judgment is already there, bankruptcy can wipe out the debt, making the judgment useless. You wouldn't be legally required to pay anymore, even if the judgment is still technically on your record.
Okay, so we've got these three options. Negotiate, vacate, or file for bankruptcy. Each one has its own pluses and minuses.
For sure. Everyone's situation is different, so there's no single best answer. That's why it's important to talk to a lawyer and get advice.
Right. And Upsolve is an amazing resource for free information and support. They even have a free tool to help you file for Chapter 7.
Upsolve wants to help people understand their options and find the best path forward.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot about the legal side of judgments. But we shouldn't forget about how stressful this stuff is.
You're right. It's not just about laws and procedures. Dealing with debt and judgments can really mess with your mental health. It can feel overwhelming and scary, like there's no way out.
Yeah, the fear of losing your house or not being able to provide for your family, that's a lot to deal with.
And that's why places like Upsolve are so great. They offer support and understanding, not just legal information. They get what people are going through, and they want to help.
They want to help you break free from debt and regain control.
Exactly.
It's important to remember that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness.
It's actually a sign of strength. It shows you're taking charge and trying to make things better.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, what are the main things our listeners should take away from this episode?
Well, the most important thing is knowledge is power. The more you know about your rights and the legal stuff involved, the better you'll be able to handle this.
So learn as much as you can.
Also, remember, you're not alone in this. Lots of people are dealing with the same things, and there's help out there. Upsolve is a great place to start. They have tons of free info and support.
Yeah, they're a fantastic resource.
And finally, don't give up hope. It's stressful, but it's not the end of the world. There are ways to fix things, and you can get through this.
You can build a better future for yourself. Thanks for joining us on Break Free.